The small town of Blackwood had always been quiet. It's the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names and secrets were buried deeper than the dead. But no secret was as haunting as the one whispered by the little girl who visited the cemetery every single day. Her name was Lily Carter, just 10 years old, with wide, knowing eyes that held a truth no one else could see. She would kneel at her father's grave, her small fingers tracing the cold stone, and say the same words over and over, "He's still alive." At first, the townspeople pitied her. They'd lost count of how many times they'd seen her there. Rain or shine, her school bag discarded beside her as she talked to the grave like her father was sitting right next to her. Some brought her snacks, others offered awkward pats on the shoulder, but no one really listened. To them, it was just grief a child's heart refusing to accept the truth. After all, everyone knew how Daniel Carter had died. A car accident a year ago, they said. Tragedy, they said. Closed casket, they said. But Lily didn't cry like someone who'd lost hope. She cried like someone who knew something. The groundskeeper, old Mr. Perkins, was the only one who ever hesitated when he heard her. Once, while trimming the hedges nearby, he swore he heard a response, a faint, raspy whisper rising from the earth, answering Lily's voice. When he told the sheriff, the man just chuckled and said, "Ghost stories won't put food on your table, Perkins." Then he arrived. Elias Harrington, a name that carried weight far beyond Blackwood. A millionaire with a reputation for digging up the pasts, sometimes literally. He hadn't been seen in town for over 20 years, not since his own father's. Mysterious death, rumor was. He'd left after uncovering something dark, something that made him vanish overnight. Now he was back, dressed in a tailored suit that looked out of place among the faded storefronts, his sharp gaze lingering on the cemetery every time he passed it. It didn't take long for him to notice Lily, and unlike everyone else, he didn't look away. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, Harrington approached her. Lily didn't startle. She just looked up, her eyes dry for once, and handed him a crumpled photograph without a word. It showed her father, Daniel, standing in front of an old radio tower deep in the woods. His smile tense, his fingers clenched around a notebook. On the back, scribbled in a child's handwriting, were the words, "He's calling for me." Beneath the wrong stone, Harrington's breath caught. He'd seen that tower before in his own father's journals. And beneath a sketch of it, the same ominous phrase, "A burial to silence the living." The next morning, Elias Harrington stood in the town's run-down archives, his fingers coated in dust as he flipped through decades-old records. The clerk had been reluctant to let him in. Blackwood didn't like outsiders poking around, but money had a way of loosening locks. The more he read, the more the pieces refused to fit. Daniel Carter's death certificate listed blunt force trauma from the accident, but the coroner's notes were suspiciously vague. No autopsy photos, no witness statements. Just a hurried stamp of approval and a burial that happened too quickly, even for a small town. And then there was the radio tower. Harrington's father had circled it in red ink in his journals, scribbling frantic notes about frequencies that shouldn't exist and voices in the static. Now, Lily's photograph tied Daniel to the same place. Coincidence was a story for people who hadn't spent their lives uncovering lies. He found Lily waiting for him outside the cemetery gates. Her knees scraped, her backpack stuffed with what looked like a child's attempt at research-crumpled newspaper clippings, a hand-drawn map of the woods, and a toy walkie-talkie with its wires exposed. "They won't let you dig," she said bluntly, as if she'd known exactly what he'd been planning. "Sheriff thinks you're crazy." Harrington crouched to her eye level. "What if I told you I don't care what the sheriff thinks?" Lily's gaze didn't waver. "Then I'd tell you to meet me at midnight." She pressed a folded note into his hand and ran off before he could ask another question. The note contained a single sentence. Written in shaky block letters, they put him in the ground, but he never stopped talking. That night, Harrington stood at the edge of the woods, the moonlight slicing through the trees like jagged silver. Lily emerged from the shadows, holding a rusted flashlight. Without a word, she led him down a path overgrown with thorns. The air thickening with the smell of damp earth and something sharper ozone, like the air before a storm. After an hour of walking, the radio tower loomed ahead, its skeletal frame. Creaking in the wind, it was older than he'd imagined, its base surrounded by warning signs that had faded to ghosts of red and white. Lily stopped abruptly, her small body rigid. "Listen," she whispered. At first, there was only silence, then a hum. Not from the tower. From beneath it, a vibration that traveled up through the soil and into Harrington's bones. Lily dropped to her knees, pressing her palm flat against the dirt. "He's here," she said, "but not like you think." Harrington's flashlight beam caught the edge of a metal hatch, nearly swallowed by weeds. The lock was new, shiny against the rust. As he reached for it, Lily grabbed his wrist. Her voice was barely audible. "And listen." Before he could ask who, the walkie-talkie in her backpack erupted with static hand, then a voice. Broken into fragments but unmistakably human. "Illy run." Harrington's blood turned to ice. It wasn't a recording. It was live. And it knew her name. The moment Harrington's fingers closed around the cold metal of the hatch, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The wind died mid-gust. The rustling leaves fell silent, and even the distant hoot of an owl cut off abruptly, as if the night itself feared what lay beneath. Lily's small hand trembled against his arm, her nails digging in like she was clinging to the edge of a nightmare. The lock gave way with a screech that echoed too loudly in the unnatural quiet, and the hatch swung open to reveal a yawning darkness that smelled of damp concrete and something sharper copper, stale sweat, and the unmistakable tang of fear. Harrington's flashlight beam sliced through the black, revealing a narrow staircase descending into the earth, the steps worn smooth by footsteps that had come and gone in secret. But it was the sound that stopped them both dead arrhythmic. Mechanical pulse, like a heartbeat amplified through old speakers, throbbing from somewhere below. Lily's breath hitched. "That's him," she whispered, her voice fraying at the edges. "That's the sound he makes when he's trying to talk." Harrington's mind raced. This wasn't just a bunker. It was a transmission. The stairs groaned under their weight as they descended, air growing thicker with every step, pressing against their skin like invisible hands. At the bottom, the beam of light caught the glint of wires, dozens of them, snaking across the floor and up the walls, all leading to a central console where a single monitor flickered with garbled static. The room was a tomb of technology, a graveyard of machines that shouldn't exist outside of government black sites. Harrington's pulse spiked when he spotted the notebook splayed open on the desk, its pages filled with frantic sketches of waveforms and equations that defied physics. But it was the last entry that made his blood run cold. "They're not just silencing me, they're asterisk harvesting it. Signal isn't from here, it's passing through. And the more I listen, the more it listens back." Asterisk. Lily let out a choked gasp and staggered toward the far wall, where a massive rusted pipe jutted from the concrete. She pressed her ear against it, her eyes squeezing shut. "He's here," she insisted, her voice cracking. "Can't you hear him?" Harrington strained, but all he caught was the low, oscillating hum of machinery, till without warning, the static on the monitor sharpened into a voice. Not broken, not a whisper, clear as day. Lily? The name wasn't spoken. It was. Pulled from the static, each syllable stretched like taffy, warped but undeniably human. Harrington's stomach dropped, because the voice wasn't just coming from the speakers. It was coming from the pipe, vibrating through the metal like a breath through a trachea. Lily's tears glittered in the monitor's glow as she answered, her small hands splayed against the rust. "Daddy." The monitor exploded with noisy cacophony of overlapping voices, some screaming, some begging, all trapped in the same endless loop. Beneath them, beneath everything, was a sound that didn't belong in this world, a deep, resonant frequency that made Harrington's teeth ache. It wasn't a voice. It was something mimicking one. The walls shuddered as the pipe began to rattle, the vibration intensifying until the concrete dust rained from the ceiling. Harrington grabbed Lily's arm, yanking her back just as the monitors. Glass shattered outward, spraying the room with shards. The last thing he saw before the lights blew was the notebook's final page. Now visible in the chaos, a single line scrawled in Daniel's handwriting, the ink fresh enough to gleam. "They didn't bury me. They connected me." The darkness that swallowed the bunker was absolute, a suffocating void, where even the sound of their own breathing seemed to echo back at them, distorted and wrong. Harrington's grip on Lily tightened as the last sparks from the shattered monitor fizzled out, plunging them into a blackness so thick it felt alive. The hum in the pipes had risen to a fever pitch, vibrating through the concrete floor like the growl of some unseen beast. And beneath it all, that voice no longer just a whisper, but a chorus of fractured syllables, looping and twisting in the dark. Lily's fingers dug into Harrington's sleeve, her entire body trembling. Not with fear, but with a terrible, dawning realization. "He's not in the pipe," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the static. "He's everywhere," Harrington's mind reeled. The bunker wasn't just a hiding place, it was a receiver, tuned to a frequency that shouldn't exist. The wires, the console, the pipes, they weren't just machinery, they were a bridge. Somewhere in the chaos, his flashlight flickered back to life, the beam cutting through the dark like a knife, and what it revealed made his blood turn to ice. The walls were covered in writing, not scribbled notes, but equations, layer upon layer of them, scrawled in everything from pencil to what looked like dried blood. Some were crossed out violently, others underlined with such force the concrete was gouged. And at the center of it all, a single phrase, repeated over and over. In Daniel's unmistakable hand, "The signal is alive." A new sound ripped through the bunker, a screech of metal on metal, deafening. Closer, and then the far wall shuddered, dust exploding from the seams as something pounded against the other side. Once, twice, 3 times, rhythmical, deliberate. A knock. "No," Lily breathed, her face draining of color. "They heard us." Harrington didn't have time to ask who. The pipes overhead erupted with noise, a cacophony of overlapping voices screaming in unison, and then silence. The kind of silence that comes when something is holding its breath. The flashlight beam wavered as Harrington swung it toward the source of the knocking, just in time to see the concrete bulge, as if something immense was pressing against it from the other side. The equations on the wall began to smolder, the numbers blackening like they were burning from within. And the air filled with the stench of ozone and something worse, something organic, like wet earth and rotting meat. Lily yanked Harrington backward as the wall split, a jagged crack racing from floor to ceiling, and for one heart-stopping second, he saw it movement in the darkness beyond, something vast and shapeless, shifting just out of sight. Then the pipe above them ruptured, spraying rusted water in an arc, and the voices returned, louder this time, hungrier, howling from every direction at once. Harrington didn't think, grabbed Lily and ran, their footsteps drowned out by the sound of the bunker collapsing in on itself behind them, the walls groaning like a living thing in pain. They hit the stairs as the first concrete slab gave way, the hatch slamming shut above them with a finality that echoed like a gunshot above ground. The forest was eerily still, the trees standing sentinel in the moonlight as if nothing had happened. But Lily knew, Harrington knew. Whatever they'd awakened down there hadn't stayed buried. And now, as the wind carried the faintest echo of a voice, Lily... From the direction of the town, they realized the horrifying truth. The signal wasn't trapped in the bunker. It had followed them out. The walk back to Blackwood should have been quiet, just the crunch of dead leaves underfoot and the distant hush of the wind through the trees. But the air was wrong, thick, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Lily kept glancing over her shoulder, her small fists clenched, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Harrington didn't need to ask why. The static was back. It's not from a radio, not from the bunker, from everywhere. It clung to the edges of his hearing, a low, insidious buzz that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. The streetlights ahead flickered. As they neared the town, their glow dimming and flaring like something was siphoning the power. Then the whispers started. Not from one direction, but from all of them, murmurs woven into the rustle of the grass. The creak of the branches, the hum of the power lines, voices without bodies, words without mouths. They found the first proof on the door of the sheriff's office. A handprint. Not in dirt or blood, but in something black and glistening. Its fingers splayed like the bearer had been clawing to get in. The substance wasn't oil. It wasn't paint. It was moving, creeping across the wood grain in slow, deliberate tendrils, retracing the shape over and over as if practicing a signature. Harrington's stomach turned. Lily reached out, her fingers hovering just above the mark. "It's learning," she whispered. Before he could stop her, she touched a hand. The second her skin made contact, the whispers stopped. The silence was worse. For 3 heartbeats, nothing moved. Then the streetlights blew out in a cascade of sparks, plunging the street into darkness, and the ground beneath them shuddered, a tremor so deep it felt like the earth itself was recoiling. Somewhere in the distance, a dog began to howl, then another, not in fear. In answer, the door to the sheriff's office swung open with a groan, revealing a tableau that froze Harrington's blood. Sheriff Hayes stood in the middle of the room, his back to them, his shoulders rigid. The walls were covered in the same black substance, but here it had formed words. Lines of jagged text that dripped like tears. He knows too much. He knows too much. He knows too much. Hayes turned slowly, and Harrington's breath caught. The man's eyes were gone, not ripped out, not bleeding, just replaced with smooth, dark orbs that reflected nothing. His mouth opened, but the voice that came out wasn't his. It was layered, a dozen voices speaking in unison, some screaming, some laughing all wrong. "You shouldn't have dug it," it said. Lily stepped forward, her voice steadier than Harrington's hands. "Where's my dad?" The thing wearing Hayes' face smiled, its lips splitting too wide. "Gone," it said, "but not dead. Never dead, just tuned in." Then it lunged. Harrington barely had time to yank Lily back before the window shattered inward, glass raining down as the whispers surged, pouring into the room like a flood. The thing that had been Hayes staggered, its body jerking as the black substance detached from the walls and swarmed it, engulfing it in a writhing, shapeless mass. The last thing Harrington saw before he dragged Lily into the street was Hayes' hand, outstretched, dissolving into the dark. The town was awake. Now lights flicked on in houses, doors slammed, voices shouted in confusion. But Harrington knew the truth. The voices weren't coming for Blackwood. They were coming from it. Every person, every animal, everything in this town was a potential receiver, and the signal was tuning itself. Lily's hand found his, her fingers icy. "It's not just my dad," she said, her voice hollow, "and it's everyone they buried." The realization hit Harrington like a bullet. The graveyard. The wrong graveyard. The one where the groundskeeper had heard whispers. The one where the dead might not be dead at all, just transmitting. The cemetery was no longer a place of rest. The iron gates hung, twisted on their hinges, as if something far stronger than wind had wrenched them open in a single furious motion. The moment Harrington and Lily stepped past the threshold, the air changed, thickening with the scent of upturned earth and something sharper. Something electric, like the charged silence between thunderclaps. The graves stretched before them in rows, their headstones gleaming pale under the moon. But it wasn't the stones that made Harrington's pulse hammer. It was the ground. The dirt between the plots was moving, shifting in slow rhythmic waves, as if something beneath was breathing. Lily's grip on his hand tightened, her nails biting into his skin. "They're waking up," she whispered, and the terror in her voice wasn't just fear. It was recognition. She'd heard this before. In her dreams. They didn't have to dig. The earth gave way on its own. Near the center of the cemetery, the soil heaved, rupturing like a wound as something clawed its way to the surface. Not a body, not bones, a hand, slick with black fluid, fingers twitching as if testing the air, then another and another. From every grave, limbs emerged, grasping, searching, their movements jerky and uncoordinated, like marionettes tugged by invisible strings. Harrington's breath came in ragged gasps. These weren't corpses. They were vessels. The black substance, the signal, had hollowed them out, filled them with something else, something that wore the dead like ill-fitting suits. One of the figures turned its head toward them, and Harrington's stomach lurched. Its face was a shifting mass of dark tendrils, its mouth a gaping hole where whispers poured out in a ceaseless stream. "He knows too much," it rasped, its voice a chorus of the damned. "He knows too much." Lily let out a choked cry and pointed. At the far edge of the cemetery, a single grave stood untouched by the chaos her father's. The headstone was cracked down the middle, but the dirt around it was still. Too still. Harrington's instincts screamed at him to run, but Lily was already moving. Her small frame darting between the shuddering graves, her eyes locked on her father's name carved into the stone. He lunged after her, his boots sinking into the unnaturally soft earth, the whispers rising to a deafening roar around them. The figures didn't attack. They watched, their hollow faces tilting in unison as Lily fell to her knees in front of the grave. "Dad!" she called, her voice breaking. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the ground shuddered, and a sound rose from the earth, not a whisper, not static, but a voice, clear and human and alive. "Lily," it said, "you have to run." Harrington's blood turned to ice. It was Daniel's voice, not a recording. "Not an echo. Him." Lily sobbed, her hands pressing into the dirt. "I won't leave you." The ground beneath her trembled, and then impossibly a hand burst through the soil, not blackened, not twisted, human. Daniel's fingers curled around Lily's wrist, his grip desperate. "They're using me," his voice gasped from below, raw with pain. "The signal, it's not just sound, it's asterisk alive, and it's hungry." Harrington dropped to his knees beside Lily, his mind racing. The graves, the bunker, the tower. They weren't just hiding a secret. They were feeding one. Around them took a step closer, their movements synchronizing, their whispers merging into a single, deafening command. "Stay." Then the sky split open, not with lightning. With light, a blinding, searing beam that lanced down from the clouds, striking the radio tower in the distance. The tower screamed, its metal frame vibrating with a sound like 1,000 voices wailing in unison. The figures in the cemetery jerked as one, their bodies convulsing, the black substance boiling under their skin. Daniel's grip on Lily tightened. "Now," he begged, "while it's distracted." Harrington didn't hesitate. He hauled Lily back as the ground beneath her father's grave exploded. Dirt and debris raining down as something monstrous erupted from the earth, not Daniel. Not a corpse, but a mass of writhing tendrils, its surface pulsing with stolen voices. It lashed out, snatching one of the figures, absorbing it. The whispers dissolving into a single guttural roar. Lily screamed. Harrington ran. Behind them, the cemetery writhed, the dead and the thing that wore them, collapsing into chaos. But one truth burned in Harrington's mind as he dragged Lily toward the woods. Daniel was still down there. And the signal wasn't just alive, it was winning. The forest swallowed them whole. The trees closing ranks like silent sentinels as Harrington and Lily crashed through the underbrush. Their breaths ragged, their clothes torn from branches that seemed to reach for them with skeletal fingers. Behind them, the cemetery was a nightmare, painted in sound shrieks that were not quite human. The wet, tearing noise of earth being rent apart, and beneath it all, that terrible, all-consuming the signal growing stronger, hungrier, as it fed on whatever it had unearthed. Lily stumbled, her knees scraping against roots. But Harrington hauled her up without breaking stride, his grip iron-tight around her wrist. He didn't need to look back to know what was following them. The air itself had turned against them. Thick with the stench of ozone and something metallic, like blood left to dry in the sun. Shadows moved where no light should cast them, slithering between the trees. Keeping pace, waiting, they burst into the clearing where the radio tower stood, its skeletal frame now glowing with an eerie, bioluminescent light, the metal vibrating. So violently, it seemed, on the verge of tearing itself apart. The ground here was littered with debris-shattered equipment, shredded notebooks, and the twisted remains of what looked like a makeshift lab long abandoned. But Harrington's eyes locked onto the center of the wreckage. The single intact machine pulsed there, its screen flickering with garbled text. speakers emitting a low, rhythmic thump like a heartbeat. Lily tore free of his grip and ran too. Her fingers flying over the keys with a certainty that made Harrington's breath catch. "He taught me," she gasped, as if reading his mind. Before they took him, said if anything happened, I had to end it." The screen flared to life, lines of code scrolling too fast to follow, and then a voice. Daniel's voice, but not from the ground, from the machine. "Lily, you have to sever the connection." Harrington's blood ran cold. Voice was clear, too clear, like Daniel was standing right beside them. But the words were wrong. The cadence was off. The thing in the cemetery hadn't been Daniel, and this wasn't him either. Lily hesitated, her hands hovering over the keyboard, her face a mask of anguish. "That's not my dad," she whispered. The machine's hum pitched. Higher, almost frantic. "It's me, Lily. They trapped me here. In the signal. You'll have to trust me." Harrington lunged forward, yanking her back just as the screen distorted, the face in the static twisting into something grotesque. Its features elongating, its mouth splitting into a grin too wide for a human skull. The voice that came out was a chorus, 1,000 stolen voices screaming in unison. Too late. The tower above them shrieked, the metal groaning as it began to collapse inward, the light intensifying to a blinding white. Harrington shielded Lily with his body as the world erupted into chaos, the machine exploding in a shower of sparks, the tower buckling like a dying beast, the very air vibrating with a frequency that threatened to shatter their bones. And then, beneath it all, a single, desperate whisper, so quiet it might have been imagination. "Goodbye, Lily." The tower lay in ruins. The forest was still, the whispers gone. Harrington lifted his head, his ears ringing, his vision swimming. Lily lay beside him, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her fingers clutching a scrap of paper that had fluttered down from the wreckage. Harrington took it, his hands shaking. A child's drawing, stick figure family beneath a smiling sun. At the bottom, in clumsy letters, "I love you, Daddy." They never found Daniel's body. The town of Blackwood was declared a disaster. The zone evacuated, then sealed off. The official reports blamed a gas leak. The truth, the signal had been silenced. But in the dead of night, if you listen close enough to an empty frequency, you might still hear it, a whisper, a hum, a voice, calling out from the static. And if you're foolish enough to answer, the signal always answers back.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.